A few weeks ago, I talked a little bit about how I attempt to be intentional with my creative life. In that video, I spoke about my weekly planning date with myself and my belief that by imposing some restrictions and guidelines on myself, I'm actually freeing myself up for creative tasks. Imposing limits seems like the opposite of the freedom found in creativity, but I firmly believe that it isn't good for my creative rhythm and artistic flow to just leave my creative life up to chance. The problem is, when I spoke about scheduling and planning, I only covered 4 of the key components of my method. I left out the very important 5th element. I'll cover that and give you an update on my journey toward 1 million words on this week's episode of The Million Words Project. Welcome to the Million Words Project. I'm author, writing instructor, and creativity coach Eric Sheridan Wyatt. 22 weeks ago, I challenged myself to write 1 million new words in 12 months. In this video series, I give regular updates about my progress towards 1 million words, and along the way, I share some of the ups and downs of my creative life. And I do that in the hopes that something I share will be helpful to you. This is the first posted episode of 2023 and the first episode back after 2-week hiatus for the winter holidays. You may also notice it is the 3rd episode in a row in which I'm combining weeks of my challenge in order to catch up a little bit and shorten the time between when I actually finish a week and when I film the content for that week's update. This is a strange episode because I'm about to share the week-by-week data with you from the last 4 weeks, and there's a little bit of a surprise. Actually, it's kind of a big surprise in that data. However, I'm actually going to wait until next week to talk to you about the details of the big surprise. What in the world am I even talking about? Well, let's dive into the update for this week and have a look. In the last update for weeks 19 and 20, I did not focus on the actual words written for those 2 weeks. That episode was very different. I wanted to speak toward a deeper issue that creeps up from time to time in my writing life, and it had very little to do with dissecting a metric like words written in a given week. With today's episode, though, we are back to a more normal focus on analyzing the ongoing data points that I collect. So let's take a look at the raw numbers from weeks 19 through 22. Weeks 19 and 20 were nearly identical, and weeks 21 and 22 were also nearly identical. Yes, there's some redistribution between the 5 categories that I monitor, but just over 100 words separated weeks 19 from week 20, and the total in the actual total column, and week 21 and 22 were only 10 words apart. As a point of clarification, this was not intentional. I monitor the words written in the nonfiction, fiction, and life document categories daily. So if I do some fiction writing on Monday, I use a master spreadsheet to log fiction writing words on Monday of the current week. At the end of the week, the spreadsheet tells me how many total words are written for those categories by adding up each day's activity. And then at the end of the week, I export my handwritten daily journal pages, which have been transcribed by a handwriting recognition application on my iPad, and I get a tally of those words to add to the weekly grand total. So, in other words, the fact that these weeks were very similar was just a coincidence. 2 points to take away from this 4-week snapshot of my writing life, though. First, I have continued to make a concerted effort to steer clear of the life document. I've set some hard limits on my work in that document for the last 2 months, and I did that in order to rebalance my cumulative totals. And these 4 weeks saw a dramatic shift with 2 weeks of 0 words in that project. This is not going to continue, but I did make an intentional choice to not do any work in that document for 2 weeks. However, the really big secret is revealed here. I have been participating in a challenge within my challenge. That's right. In my effort to rebalance the distribution of words across the various categories of writing, I challenged myself to really step up my fiction writing effort. I'm going to talk in detail about this Fiction First initiative next week. And I learned a lot about myself over the 5 weeks. So come back for more details on that. But for now, let's just look at the graphical comparison between week 12 on the left and week 22 on the right. This pie chart shows the cumulative category breakdown. On week 12, the cumulative totals were heavily skewed toward the Life Document Project, and I had written very little fiction. At that time, I made an intentional effort to take this data and adjust my focus to rebalance things. And now, at the end of week 22, just 10 weeks later, I have a much more appropriately balanced cumulative total. The Life document makes up about 35% of my total output over 22 weeks, down from almost half of my output through the first 12 weeks. And my fiction writing life has begun to catch back up to what my ideal distribution should look like. Okay, I hear you out there. You're saying, I'm about to find some cat videos to watch if this guy keeps talking about numbers. I thought this was a writer. Why is he so interested in numbers and charts and graphs? Well, I'll answer that in this week's topic, so let's go. In the update for week 15, I talked about my Sunday morning ritual of making a plan for my week. I talked about how I review the prior week's progress, assess the things that worked well and the things that could use improvement, make a plan for the new week based on that assessment and my goals, and then execute that plan to the best of my ability. Review, assess, plan, and execute. What I realized this week was that my 4-step process was missing a 5th element. Well, it wasn't exactly missing, but I wasn't being as intentional with applying that fifth element as I should be. What is that missing piece, you ask? Well, the 5th element of my process is monitoring my progress throughout the week. I was actually monitoring my progress in 2 general ways, but they weren't specific enough. First, I was keeping track of the word count within the 5 categories of the Million Words Project. That is a type of monitoring, and this gave me some solid data on where I had spent my writing effort in a given week. Second, I was checking off items from my ongoing Open Loops task list, which was giving me some feedback on my non-writing or real-world tasks, errands, chores, and other goals. What I was missing was real-time feedback about how I was spending my actual time. And I realized this because I was able to hit my writing goals and accomplish a number of my open loop tasks, and yet I still found myself wasting a lot of time with things that really didn't have much value or meaning. And that wasted time was making me feel lousy. Time is the great equalizer. Some of us may have more resources, more privileges, more talent, but we all have a limit to our time. When it comes to an artistic or creative pursuit, you may have more time to devote to that one big thing, project you've always wanted to accomplish than someone else, or you may have less time due to your life circumstances. But no matter who you are, you don't have more than 24 hours in a day. Over the course of this Million Words Challenge, I've had several weeks where I've met my minimum word target and checked off most of the things on my list, but still ended up feeling like I'd squandered a lot of time on things that just aren't important. To rectify this early on, I set up an ideal weekly calendar. I divided every waking hour of the week into time blocks in which I would be addressing the various kinds of activities I want to be engaged in. This included various categories of activities, and I attempted to balance the creative and real-life activities of my current life circumstances. I then posted a printout as a reference, and I even went into the calendar app on my phone to set up recurring appointments that would send me a text reminder about what should be happening in any given time block. Well, let's just say the ideal week never happened. In fact, I came to realize that I have too many variables in my life right now to come even close to those ideals. I plodded on with constant text reminders of what I should be doing on an ideal day, but because the ideal week was so far away from my daily reality, I eventually became numb to those reminders. At the 5-month mark of the project, I was constantly waffling between 2 extremes. On the one hand, I could look at the raw data and think, I've accomplished a lot. I'm at week 22 and rapidly closing in on 500,000 words. On the other hand, looking at the size and scope of what I want to accomplish, it's barely a dent. And there were plenty of times I ended the week thinking, this is okay, but it's not great. I still feel like I'm wasting a lot of time. Now, neither of those two extremes are fully true, and neither is completely false. Monitoring my actual time spent on various parts of my life needed to be part of my ongoing self-improvement. I needed something more concrete and reflective of my weekly reality, not an idealized framework to judge myself against. So I added a modular, time-based system to my Sunday morning planning session. Each week I set a certain number of hours I anticipate spending on a variety of tasks. Not just the creative hours I want to spend, but the time spent on chores and errands and personal tasks, and time spent in recreation or set aside for maintaining relationships. And then each day, as I actually spend time doing those things, I move the task into the completed column. If I get to the end of Monday and didn't get to one or more of my time blocks, I redistribute it to another time in the week. This is realistic, as there is almost no day at this point in my life where the anticipated schedule doesn't get disrupted. Then, at the end of the week, I can look at all of the wins in one column and anything that was never quite gotten to, never quite accomplished in another. And I can easily say, next week I need to do better at putting the hours in to get my household errands done, for example. You see, adding this more granular level of monitoring isn't just a motivator to get more done, it's also a method of monitoring that provides me with data to rein in those two extremes I mentioned earlier. Because neither the I've done so much nor the I've wasted all my time perspective is correct. I won't do a deep dive into the actual methods I use right now. If someone out there really wants me to go into more detail, I'll be happy to share more. But for now, I think it's important just to share that there's a fifth element to my process in case you want to design your own planning and implementation strategies. It's review, assess, plan, execute, and monitor. And it goes without saying, but the final step really is to repeat this process again next week, and then the week after, and the week after. Today's quote comes from the Greek Stoic tradition of philosophy. Progress is not achieved by luck or accident, but by working on yourself daily. I would suggest that if you trade the word yourself in this quote and replace it with your art or your project, you would have an equally true statement. For me, working on myself includes many aspects of life, psychological, emotional, and physical. The brain, the heart, and the body. And my literary and business goals are a big part of my overall push toward becoming a better version of myself. That becoming is not achieved by luck or accident, but by working on myself daily. To experience progress toward that better version of me, I need to be intentional about the work I'm doing every day. Finding a way to monitor my progress is very important to maintaining a proper perspective. Otherwise, I'm likely to either wildly overestimate my progress, which can happen if I'm only looking at the weekly word target, or I might spiral into a fit of creative despair due to a bout of pessimism. By taking a step back to look at both the big picture of what I'm hoping to accomplish over the long term, while also giving specific consideration to my day-to-day activities, I was able to devise an additional method of self-monitoring. I'm constantly engaging in a cycle of reviewing my progress, making an assessment of what is working well and what could be improved, planning specifically towards improvement, taking action to execute that plan, and monitoring my actions to assure compliance with the plan. I share tips and tricks I use to advance my ongoing creative life, not because I think my specific methods are right for you. Instead, I hope that by demonstrating what I've done to accelerate my creative output, you'll be inspired to find what is right for you in your particular needs and circumstances. This week, I'm going to ask you to ponder a question specifically about how you monitor your own progress. Now, you could use this question as a writing prompt in your journal or as a writing out loud exercise, and that would be great. Another option would be to talk this over with a trusted creative friend or have an internal dialogue with your creative self. If you have a big creative or other multi-step project you hope to accomplish in the coming months or years, how do you monitor your progress? Knowing that no big idea project can be accomplished quickly, how do you ensure that the small steps you are taking toward that big idea are actually getting you closer to what you hope to accomplish? Are you monitoring your progress in a way that gives you solid feedback, allows you to adjust, and also keeps you feeling like you're making steady progress? Because I am still adjusting to the new normal of the post-pandemic life, and I am still constantly tinkering with the framework from within which I am approaching my creative and business life. Maybe you found a solid groove in that consistent creative rhythm, and if so, the answer to these questions will serve as validation for that path you are on. But if not, no worries. Today is a great day to start the process of refining and reassessing your creative life so that you can blaze a new trail toward the results you long to see. That's all for this week's update. I hope you'll come back and join me next week as I detail the results of my 5-week challenge within a challenge that I refer to as my Fiction First initiative. Until then, if you find these videos helpful, please consider leaving a comment or hitting the like and subscribe buttons. There are also ways to connect with me listed in the show notes, including links to my Twitter, Instagram, and website. Stop by and say hello. So long for now, and remember, your words matter. Make them count.